Real questions, real answers for real life. Come on in and pull up a chair. You're at 1850 Main Street with Michael DelGiorno and David Zanotti.
The question on the table once again, is the Declaration of Independence still relevant in America today?
All right, cup of coffee two, and I'm bugging you. I've got to be bugging you because you want to get to the end line of the Declaration of Independence. I linger over every word because I'm messed up on this. You know what I'm afraid of? I'm afraid that people don't believe it anymore. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and it bothers me. I think to myself, if we don't believe this anymore, what do we believe? What does it mean to be an American? Because the only America we have in history is this one. It started in this document.
Yeah.
So, quick question for you. I've been asking people, I just asked some college grads, recent college grads, how much of the Declaration of Independence and Constitution did you get in high school? And I got a blank stare. All right. I mean, you asked your kids, right? What did they get?
Yeah. And, again, it's all, during COVID, I could actually witness the classes because it was all done on the computer. So some of it is subject to Nick's memory and recall,
which can be incredibly good if we're talking about statistics.
Yes, but not necessarily if we're, and so, they touched on some of it. Mine is so long ago now. I mean, it's 45 years ago, but I think we probably in my generation got way more into it, a little more in your generation. And I think our grandparents' generation, they were way, way deep into it. But the bottom line is you can't be into it enough. We couldn't study it enough and we didn't. And it's less and less.
If you look at the old books, and I love to get old history books, I have friends associated with our organization that actually get me old history books. And I love old history textbooks. I got to tell you, it started about 50 years ago, maybe 60 years ago, that the people who started this country stopped being cool in the books. They stopped being worthy of respect. They stopped being special. They stopped being heroes. And they became kind of, oppressors, not cool, weird dressers, out of touch, out of style, out of sync. In other words, they were not in touch with the current reality, which is what bothers me. Because the current reality that these people came out of was a worldview that gave them the basis to start their own nation. What do I mean by that? We went through the we hold these truths to be self-evident. That's a big deal. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Now get this. They believe God gave them those rights. Then it goes on that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. This might be the operational clause upon which America is distinctive from every other proposition in the world. Mm-hmm. That our form of civil government is instituted among men, but the power comes from all of us, delegated to a civil government based upon our consent.
Oh, you're going to love the ending when I get to it. Not that I know you walk around with a pocket one in your briefcase all the time. But yeah, this is throughout the document. It's restated in different ways. That's how important and focused they were.
In other words, this isn't like a tug of war where the biggest number of people gets to define reality and everybody else gets left out. No, this is a group of people coming together saying, on the basics of reality, we're in agreement. And one of those things that we agree upon is you can't do government unless the people being governed agree. Because the power ultimately resides in them. The power comes from the people. The power comes from the people.
Do you think that's what we live every day when we're watching CNN, MSNBC, Fox News?
I don't know, man. You tell me about the administrative state. You tell me how many times I feel like I'm being dictated to by these talking heads that are telling me what someone in Washington, D.C. has defined as reality, and my job is put up, shut up, or just go away.
Or how about executive orders from governor's mansions to the Oval Office?
And it goes on and on and on. What if I do not consent? What if I just, okay, well, you're just one person. What if a whole bunch of us don't consent? What if 25 or 30% of us don't consent? What if 50% of us don't consent? This is the great challenge in the human equation and why the 4th of July is so important. 4th of July is so important because at one brief shining moment in human history, enough people got together to create a critical mass of consent They had enough leverage. They had enough land. They had enough gunpowder. They had enough courage. They had enough bodies to say, we don't consent any longer with the mother country, so we're starting our own. Now, we like to do this peaceably. We like to do it respectfully, but we're doing it whether you like it or not.
And the answer was not.
Yeah, a great big not. All right. And it didn't start in 1776. This is another thing kids have not learned in school anymore. It started in 1775. That was when the first battle actually happened, Battle of Lexington Green. The shot heard around the world. Now, why do we take the time to repeat these stories? Well, look, if we're going to talk about 1850, about a nation divided and a house divided, this is serious stuff. If you're divided because you see the world completely differently, I got to tell you something. We got a problem. So my question is do we see the world differently because we never learned how the country started in the first place? Is it just ignorance, or have we as a culture decided we don't want to hear that stuff anymore?
Nick and I were sitting on the back patio, and the topic came up, and he looked at me and he said, well, no, I knew what to do. I just didn't do it. We were playing spades and we were partners. And I said, well, Nick, that's a good lesson in life, because unfortunately, we usually fail because we don't do what we know. Rare is the case we fail because we don't know what to do. What you're bringing up, though, is significant, because we have a whole generation that may fail because they don't know. Leading up to that generation is people that did know and failed to live it. I mean, I could turn the whole question around and say, yeah, never mind the challenges of 1850 and slavery. How about the challenges of 2023? How are we doing with life?
Yeah.
Liberty, the pursuit of happiness, or the entitlement of happiness?
I'll even go back to how we doing with respect. I mean, what's the basis in a world without truth, without a creator who gives us our value and worth? How do you come up with a place where you respect each other?
Well, John Quincy Adams with the famous quote, right? This republic is altogether wrong for an immoral people. He knew that in order to self-govern, you needed faith. You needed restraints. Morality mattered in how you were as a person when no one was looking, let alone as a dutiful citizen.
Okay, so I'm going to pick your brain, because I'm really wrestling with this question. If you don't have a God in the reality equation, who is the creator, how do you get to respect for your neighbors? How do you respect people you don't like? How do you respect yourself?
No, there are a few that I have seen that are capable of living the golden rule without any kind of faith, but it's rare.
Is it just, I mean, do they just gut it out? I mean,
well, real faith should inform everything about you, in priority and in detail. I don't think you can be a nation under God if you're an ungodly people. So if you don't have the understanding of the creator and creation that our founding fathers are, that's going to misinform your ability to live this experiment 200 years later compared to what they were committed to live then.
Okay, when you say ungodly people, are you meaning sinful people, or are you meaning people who don't believe in God?
Just don't believe at all.
Got it.
Where else would you get these inalienable rights from?
There you go. That brings us back to that first premise of a truth that is self-evident, that there is a creator and we're not him, and he made us, therefore his rules make sense.
The only truth that's self-evident today in this culture is that there is no such thing as absolute truth. So how do we overcome that?
And this is why I think you find the Declaration of Independence being buried more and more and more, because people are incredibly uncomfortable with this phrase. We had a conversation a long time ago on public radio with Barry Lind.
Oh, my favorite. He worked for me.
Barry Lind?
Yeah, Pat Corton and Barry Lind did Battle Line.
Get out of here. Barry Lind did not work for you.
Yeah.
This is the founder of Americans United for the Separation of Church and State.
Let me tell you something.
Get out.
There were times I sat with Barry. Barry is Barry and I have absolutely no values, no beliefs in common. I am very strong in faith. I am a very strong conservative. I am well-read. I am rooted. I am
Barry Lind is none of the above.
No, but I had conversations with him, and I just have to take breaks. Barry, I'm questioning everything. He was probably one of the most brilliant, persuasive people, but Barry was just one of the most brilliant liberal debaters you will ever meet. Made Carvel look like a lightweight. He'd have anybody questioning their beliefs.
Yeah. So I'm in this debate on public radio with Barry Lynn, and the litigation was against the Pledge of Allegiance being read out loud, people standing up and reciting it in public schools. Barry Lynn was completely opposed to that. And he had clients and plaintiffs, and there was all this stuff going on. Okay. So we're talking about the Pledge of Allegiance. And so then I asked him, I said, well, okay, fine. If the Pledge of Allegiance is against the conscience of a child sitting there hearing it, therefore it shouldn't be stated out loud because it offends their conscience, what happens when they read the Declaration of Independence?
Oh, that was a great line.
And you know what he said? He said, if children in public schools were forced to hear the reading of the Declaration of Independence out loud, that would be problematic as it regards free speech.
And maybe without the fight and maybe without the court case, they've achieved it, because I think there's very little reading and studying of it.
Isn't that interesting? I mean, Lynn was totally honest as the chairman or president of Americans United for the Separation of Church and State. He's basically saying that you can't even today read the words of the Declaration of Independence out loud for fear of offending someone who does not believe in a creator. That, therefore, it shall not be read at all for fear of offense. This was his position. This was a number of years ago, and I don't believe it's changed at all. How can you come from that position? How do you get to where America is on the 4th of July?
Let me ask it in this form. Can America get right with the Declaration of Independence without first getting right with God?
Well, that's kind of almost like a chicken and egg type thing, because it's a very fair question. It's almost a rhetorical question. Now, the problem, again, when we ask that question, I mean, you can hear Barry Lynn's head exploding right now.
Well, yeah, I don't want to offend anybody, but if you want to get in line with the Founding Fathers, they had that certainty.
And here's where people are afraid that somehow this will become
a theocracy. That's ridiculous.
No, that's not the word, though. That this will become a question about religious compulsion. See, what's amazing about the Declaration of Independence is these truths were self-evident, and the government was built upon consent. The point is this: if Americans no longer believe in self-evident truth, if they no longer believe that there is a creator who's made us and given us our rights, then we should be honest enough to acknowledge that we no longer consent to the Declaration of Independence. That is completely irrelevant, and so is the Constitution that flows from it. We should be honest enough to accept the fact that we've divorced ourselves from the founding worldview. Therefore, we're cut free and we're on our own.
And in the brilliance of this document, it gives you that right.
It gives you that right, because nowhere in the Declaration is there a moment of compulsion. Everything is built upon consent.
Okay, now I'm the one that's not going to sleep at night. I need to get a cup of coffee.
All right. All right.
When you subscribe to 1850 Main Street, you're the first to find out what's happening next with new guests, publications, and events. And when you spread the word about 1850 Main Street, you're helping others find real answers to the real questions facing America right now. To learn more, visit 1850mainstreet.com. And please, tell a friend.
So are we talking about, I mean, look, we're just being honest. If you can't consent any longer, then what are you holding on to? So I get into these conversations often. A lot of times it happens when people are tearing down monuments. And, you know, some monuments are worth tearing down. Some names are worth changing. People do stuff like this. It's not new and unusual. I mean, if you had the right to name a building something back in 1920, why don't you have the right to rename the building something now? I get it. We change. Okay. And the things that we value, the statues that we build, the names that we place on things are clearly manifestations of the things that we hold important, or the people we hold dear, or the values that we have. Get all that. Not going to get caught in that conversation. But when people get into this total attack upon the reality equation of the Declaration of Independence, I've been doing this all over the country because I get so frustrated, and it's not worth being frustrated over, because I get it. They're being honest. I appreciate their honesty. We don't want to live in the America of the Declaration of Independence. We don't want to live in the worldview of that document. We don't want to read it. We don't want to know it. We don't want to hear it. We want to be completely autonomous, and we want to reinvent reality all by ourselves. You know what? We have the right to do that. They have the right to do that. I have the right to consent or not. But before we even get to that part, here's what I do. Watch this. I hand them a pen. I say, okay, we're starting over. Here's a pen. How about writing it down like they did in 1776? Show me what it looks like. You know, Michael, I've never had one person pick up the pen.
Not even Barry Lynn?
No, Barry's got nothing.
He'd love to fight little battles, but nobody wants to create something or thinks they can create something more genius.
He'd love to tear it down, but he knows darn well that the vast majority of people do not like his protest reality. In other words, the reality of Lynn and the people who are against any discussion whatsoever of self-evident truth or creator is basically this. We don't want any of that, so leave us alone. But what about the people who do? What about the people who still believe in the reality equation? Well, they're antiquated, and let them all die because we're going to do it without them from this point forward. Okay, look, here's the pen. Tell me what that looks like. And are they going to be compelled to do it because you say so? Or do they get the right to say, no, thank you. No, thank you. We like to go back to the old way. No, thank you. We don't like total, absolute, complete autonomy. We like respect. We like conscience. We like the ability of having the consent of the governed. We like having a voice at the table. We like all that stuff. And we like there being a set of rules. Now, that set of rules kind of repeats itself over and over again in the document, which brings us to that last line that you're in love with, right?
Well, I believe in an old formula. Passion equals focus equals action, sets in motion a direction, arrives at a destination. And I think the passion throughout this, I mean, believe it or not, like I said earlier, when they're going through the very specific list of grievances.
Yeah.
And you can hear, we've tried everything. We've reached out. We've been ignored. We've been attacked at sea. People forget it's a very human document. But we often have conversations, David, about what matters most is the people's house, the House of Representatives. Everybody's focused on the presidency. And I think, I get proud of this last line because it reminds me of us. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress, assembled appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for our intentions, do in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are and right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved of all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connections between them and the state of Great Britain ought to be totally dissolved, and that the free independent states have full power to levy war, I love this, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all the acts and things which independent states may have a right to do. And I love this last line. And for the support of this declaration, with the firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, fortunes, and sacred honor. I want to focus on that last line because who is thinking about who loves this country? Our military, of course, but who loves this country enough to give up their life? They pledged their life. They pledged their fortune. There was no envy of this guy makes more money than me. This guy makes more money than me. Where's my share that I'm entitled to? These men were pledging their lives and fortune and their sacred honor for this stance they took. That's the kind of Americans that were at the founding of America. What is the state of Americans today in the decline of America? It's a sobering vision on this 4th of July, but that's why I have you to show me the positive.
Well, you look at the end of the document, you find these names written. They wrote them down, and they were speaking for their families. So these were delegates that were speaking for their wives, their children, everything that they had. And they knew that if they were going to ultimately develop the freedom that they believed came from God for themselves, they had to first get free. And so they made their statement. Many of them did lose their lives. Many of them did lose their fortunes, but they didn't lose their sacred honor. Mm-hmm. Now, we talk about this, and of course, in the day and age that you and I live right now, we got a problem, and we got to bring it up. People dismiss this document today because they say, well, a lot of these people were slave owners. But guess what? A lot of them weren't. There were already free colonies. There were places where slavery was not permitted in the United States from the beginning. And one of the great myths of our country is that this document existed simply to be built upon or to preserve slavery. That is absolutely absurd. This document is the moment in which a group of people decided they wanted to be free, and their confession was so thorough, their worldview was so strong, that there was no way they could be free and eventually not everyone be free. So even though they had the thing set up in steps where they were concerned about their world and their order, they made a confession that covered everyone. Now, whether they did that absolutely intentionally, whether they did it based upon overstatement or hyperbole, all I know is that the same liberty that they believe God gave them was the same liberty God gave everyone. And eventually, about 10 years after 1850, they had to cross that bridge for everyone.
So it's not all about fireworks, potato salad, hot dogs.
No, but I got a new grill I can't wait to cook out.
The conversations are just getting started. To get connected, check out 1850mainstreet.com. We don't data mine anyone or sell your information. Subscribe today so you don't miss a single conversation. We'll see you next time here at 1850 Main Street.